Hi, I'm James Kahn, and these are my stories. And this is the story about the time I got sued. I've been an emergency room doctor. I worked for many years, for 20 years, all over. I worked emergency rooms in Chicago and LA, San Fernando Valley, up in Northern California, Tuolumne County, Gustine. And in all that time, I've only been sued once. And this is that story. I was working in a sort of urban ER when the cops brought in a guy handcuffed behind his back. He's kind of sullen, but he was fully together and with it. And the story was he'd been drinking, doing they weren't sure what, but he'd gotten violent with his girlfriend, threatened her with a knife. She called the cops. The cops came and arrested him. But then, because of who he was, it turned out, he was able to cut a deal with them that they wouldn't arrest him if he promised to come to our hospital and sign in voluntarily to the rehab unit. The reason he was able to do that was that he was a doctor in another part of the city. So they brought him in, and my job in the ER was simply to clear him medically, make sure that he was healthy enough to go into a rehab unit, and then he'd get transferred upstairs to rehab. So while we were putting him in a gurney, the cops got another call. They had to leave, so they uncuffed him and left. And I started doing my exam. It's a pretty simple exam. But as I said, he's kind of a sullen guy. And while I'm doing the exam, he starts complaining about his stiff neck and saying he thinks the cops manhandled him during the arrest. He might have to sue the department, and he wants me to get a neck x-ray to document it. I said it wasn't really my job to get a neck x-ray. I'm just clearing him medically. I didn't think he really needed it. I felt his neck. It didn't feel so bad. So he said, okay. He was kind of pissed off. And I go ahead and finish examining him. And while I'm examining him, he said, listen, can you do me a solid? And he reaches into his pants and pulls out from his underwear a baggie of dope. And he says, you got to toss this for me or hide it or something. If I go up to rehab and they find this dope on me, the whole deal with the cops will be broken. I'll be thrown in the slammer. Come on, man, do me a solid, please. So I thought, okay, I hate being in this position, but okay, I don't want to screw this guy's life. And they know he's been smoking dope anyway. So, okay, so I take the baggie and just stick it in the pocket of my white lab coat. It was pretty late. It was around midnight. And as I'm just about ready to transfer him to rehab, he stands up and reaches into his pocket and pulls a knife on me. I jump back. And he says, I'm not going into rehab. And he lunges at me with a knife. And fortunately, I was holding the clipboard, so I held the clipboard up in front of me, and the knife scraped right across the clipboard, right in front of my neck. And I screamed, security! And fortunately, there was a big security guard standing right around the corner, and he came running in. So this patient grabs a nurse and holds the knife to her neck and says, I'm getting out of here. Now, 2 more security guards showed up, but security guards in hospitals aren't allowed to carry weapons, except at LA County, which is a bunch of other ER stories I have. So the 3 of them kind of surround him, but he's holding this nurse at knife point, and he slowly backs down the corridor and out of the hospital and leaves. We found out the next day that he'd forced her to her car. She drove him. After about a mile or so, he kicked her out of the car and left. And then I heard that a couple days later, the cops caught him and put him in jail. And that was the last I thought about it. And I didn't think about it again for a year later until a day before the statute of limitations would have been up, when I got served and was told I was being sued by him and letting him escape in the face of him having a psychotic break. So I said, well, this is obviously a ridiculous nuisance suit. And I talked to the hospital's lawyers, because I was covered under the hospital malpractice policy. And they said, well, we'd like to settle this suit. So I said, screw that. I'm not going to settle a ridiculous suit like that. I don't want a lawsuit on my name. So they said, okay. They talked about it, and they said, okay, well, we'll fight this for a while. We'd rather settle because it's cheaper than, going all the way to court. But we'll fight it for a while. But just to let you know, if a year goes by and we're still in the midst of it, all this, we're going to settle. And if you don't want to settle at that point, you're freely welcome to keep fighting it, but it's on your nickel. We went through a series of horrendous, humiliating depositions. This guy got a lawyer who was one of these, a well-known cutthroat, who just, raked me over the coals with all kinds of I felt like I was guilty after a while. At one point he said, so what did you do with this baggie of dope that this drug addict gave you? So I said, well, I stuffed it in my pocket, and I didn't think about it again until I was driving home. And I was on the freeway, and I realized, oh shit, I've got this baggie of dope in my pocket. What am I going to do? So I was driving in the left-hand lane, in the passing lane. I opened the window, and I tossed it out onto the median strip. So this lawyer says, wait a minute. You threw a bag of narcotics out into the public commons where any child could get them? Like, what is wrong with you, doctor? I said, I didn't think a child was going to cross 3 lanes of freeway to get to the median where this bag of dope was. Anyway, it was like that. It went on for a year like that until finally someone got hold of his psychiatric records in which he had confessed that he was doing this whole suit just to get some money. And when presented with that fact, he dropped it, and that was the end of the only time I've ever been sued.